Hi, everybody, and welcome to Pebble People. Today, I'm really excited to be hosting Elliott Rae here in our podcast studios, where we'll be talking about all things fatherhood. Welcome.
Hi.
Thanks
Thank
for
you for
joining
having
us.
me. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Great. We would love to get started by just getting to know you a little bit better. Tell us about yourself, how you got started in this world, and what you're up to.
All right, so it's a long story. I don't know if you want the short version or the long version or the middle version.
The
I'll give
middle
you
version's
one.
perfect.
So I am Elliott Rae. Hi, everybody. And I do work around supporting dads, creating safe space for fathers, helping to redefine and evolve masculinity and look at how we, as men can help ourselves and other people around us as well. I feel very privileged to do my work. It's come from a place of trauma in my personal life around fatherhood and how we became a family. But my wife says your mess is your message. And I have used my personal experiences plus my long career in the civil service as head of diversity at the Treasury and head of race at DEFRA to create spaces now for men to speak about their fatherhood journeys and challenges, but also to work with businesses and organizations to encourage them to support dads to parent out loud and help to redefine manhood in the workplace. So I do that through a variety of different ways. One of the best things that we do as a company, Music Football Fatherhood, which is my non-for-profit organization, is we work in football with Queen's Park Rangers, the best football team in the world. I'm a fan. They're not the best team in the world, but we work with the Premier League, Arsenal, Watford to create spaces in football clubs for dads to connect. We do monthly online sessions called The Lodge, where we invite different therapists and speakers to kind of talk to dads about life. And we have a best-selling book called Dad. I'm the presenter of the BBC documentary called Becoming Dad. And, one of the, authorities on fatherhood, especially in work in the UK as well. So, I'm privileged to do my work and I love it every day to be able to talk about interesting things with people like yourself.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And so I'd like to pick up on the topic of fatherhood, because obviously that's something that you're focused on. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the highs and lows that you've seen on this journey of trying to change the image or, kind of evolve it in some way? I'd love to hear. I'm sure there's lots of good things, but there's also, I'm sure, some things you'd love to see change too.
Yeah, I think with change, it's always slower than we would like. And I think it's always easier to look at kind of what isn't going well. And I think it is important when we're talking about parenting and fatherhood to recognize that just 20 years ago in the UK, we didn't have any statutory paternity leave. It didn't exist. So when most of our parents were young, it was very rare for their dads to take off any time at work. It was very rare for their dads to be at the birth of their children. And over the last 2 or 3 decades, that has changed a lot. But I think sometimes we can get frustrated at the pace of change, that it isn't happening fast enough. There is always resistance. I think unless you're doing something, or if you are doing something that is really culture changing and that is really challenging kind of cultural expectations that we've had for years, if you're doing that, you're going to meet resistance. Yeah. Some people are very comfortable with how things are. Some people don't realize we need to change. Some people are benefiting from the way we do things. And so when you are actively kind of going against generations of this is how we have done something and maybe questioning the model we've used for decades, that's not going to be easy, and I love it when I kind of love it when there is resistance in a way, because I think that means that the message is resonating with some people and some people it's not resonating with, and that's fine. I understand that. But it's the challenge is how do we make sure that we bring people along, and that can be difficult. But I think I've found in my work, engaging men and dads is about telling very personal stories. At the beginning when I spoke about the reason I do my work, when my daughter was born, she had an infection called Group B strep. Yeah. And for people who know about this infection, 1 in 10 babies will pass away, and 1 in 14 will have a very serious lifelong disability. So she was very sick. We spent 2 weeks in hospital. And within those 2 weeks, good days, bad days. Yeah. At the end of the 2 weeks, she developed a bump on the back of her head, like a golf ball, right, on the back of her head. And the specialists came in from different hospitals, prepared us for all eventualities. Got the good news, we can go home, and it was fine. The Monday went straight back into work, with a smile on my face, chairing meetings, doing my work. And when I talk to dads and share that story, and we realize that we all have individual stories, whether it's the same thing that me and my family went through, whether it's something completely different, we all have individual stories. And I think if we can create space to tell those stories, actually we can realize we have more in common than we thought we did.
Yeah.
And then we would think about the change that we want to make. Once we get to know each other and we share each other's stories, we can realize that it's actually beneficial for all of us. So the resistance is part of the journey, I think. I embrace it. But it's also really important to think about how do you work with people and find commonality to get past that. But with that being said, the vast majority of my work is very well accepted. I think as a society, we are ready now for this conversation. We weren't a few years ago, I would say pre-COVID. But now we are definitely ready for the conversation. So it's really exciting.
That's great. So you said pre-COVID. Do you think COVID did something to hasten that change or make it more ripe for change? If so, in what ways?
100%.
Oh,
100%. We're sitting in a kind of co-share working space.
Yeah.
These things are busy now. I don't think they were as busy 4 or 5 years ago. Like the way we have fundamentally looked at work is so different. All of us had stories about being on Zoom and the kids are in the background, or you're washing, hanging up in the background.
Yeah, it still is, I think.
Still is.
I think it still is.
Or a delivery man from Amazon is knocking on the door, right? Like we got to literally see into each other's lives.
Yeah.
And we realized that we can do our work from home a lot of the time very well, sometimes even better. And we realized we can make relationships online if we invest time. Of course, face-to-face sometimes is good too, but we realized that we can work in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think when it came to fatherhood changed massively. One of the good things I think came from COVID is that dads throughout that period spent more time with their children than ever before. And a lot of fathers realized that there is a different alternative way of doing things. I remember I was chairing a panel, maybe 2021, and it was a big company. I won't say the name, but they probably provide your broadband. Big company.
Okay.
And there was someone very, very senior on the panel, and he was talking about the fact that during COVID was the first time he slowed down and actually spent a lot of time at home. He was there for the dinner as a family in the evening. He was there to read a book at bedtime. And he said that he realized he didn't know his children before. So I'm sure he could, pick them out of a lineup if he needs to.
Yeah.
You know, Johnny, whatever. But he didn't know them in regards to their intimate relationships with their friends.
Yeah.
Or what they are or aren't enjoying about their schoolwork. He didn't know them in an intimate level. And he didn't know that until he actually was at home during COVID and spent proper time at home with his family. And so now he does things differently. And I think for so many dads, we had a bit of that experience in different ways. And how do we keep that? How do we keep some of that and keep the flexibility that we need to be active and equal parents?
Interesting. And so how is this sort of narrative linked to your MFF? How is it, it's interesting that you've weaved in football, right? Because it's such a masculine heavy topic. So tell me more about how that came about and what that looks like in this context.
Yeah, so I think with any change, it's like bottom up and top down. So if we want to encourage dads to be active, equal parents, then they are going to need structural and policy change, and we need government and businesses to do more. But we also need dads to change the way they look at life in regards to friendships, relationships, work, parenting, health, and think differently about how we can reprioritize some of the stuff we do and why that is so important to not just being allies to other people, but also your own longevity, your own health, your own relationships. And what we do for Music Football Fatherhood is definitely that bottom-up approach. It's working with dads, creating space for dads for conversation, for community, for connection, to share and to encourage and hold each other to account and inspire around topics like balance in your work. You know, the idea that a lot of us have been conditioned to prioritize work. And don't get me wrong, we need to make money, especially in this cost of living crisis. But how can we do that differently and flexibly to allow ourselves to also nurture other parts of our life, especially parenting, to explore co-parenting?
Yeah.
You know, we know marriage breakdown and relationship breakdown is rife in society. There are so many co-parenting families, so exploring what that looks like, dealing with processing loss.
Yeah.
1 in 4 pregnancies will end in miscarriage. We don't hear from the dad's perspective so much.
Yeah.
So a space to process some of that stuff, a space to think about how do we parent children that are growing up into teenage years, our sons who are maybe being exposed to online misogyny and negative male role models. How do we be a positive role model for our children growing up? So creating a space for all of those sort of things.
Yeah.
And, some of my best experiences of my life outside of my family have been working in music, football, fatherhood, with dads. We did a QPR event. The BBC came to film our QPR event for a documentary. And on the way to the stadium, I was with a guy called Jerry, who was the cameraman on the day. And he was 72. And he had grown-up children who were also cameramen. And he'd explained that he'd been to areas of the world where there is famine and war and devastation. He's the guy behind the camera when you're watching the news.
Yeah.
So we walk into QPR and we start the session. We use football analogies. Like we get the dads to write down their 11-a-side team. We give them a handout. And then we ask them to say, who's your goalkeeper? Who's up front for you? Who's on the right wing? And they might put their wife might be the striker, and God might be the centre back, and their friend might be at left back. And, they have that. We have a great conversation. So we were doing the session, and then we went out to the pitch side, and there was a guy called Matthew who had sadly lost his daughter in a car accident a couple of years ago. And Matthew asked, says, Elliott, can I share this with the group? And he got up and he spoke about his experience. And it was obviously very sad, but also incredible because the other men kind of got up and hugged him. And it was a genuine moment of vulnerability and support. Those moments where I can pinpoint only a few in my life that I think I've experienced that. But it was a genuine feeling of support and emotion, and everyone was hugging and crying each other. And I could see Jerry filming, but shaking as he's filming. And in the car park afterwards, I said to him, Jerry, how was it for you? And he said, I'm 72 years old. I've filmed across the world in war zones, in famine, etc. I've never experienced men connecting in that way and sharing vulnerability in that way. And I think when we create the space, there is the stereotype that men don't talk. But I think when you create the space and do it well, men will talk, and they have a lot of stories and trauma to share. And I think that is us trying to do that work to encourage and support and ultimately help dads to maybe look at things a little bit differently. And also while doing the kind of structural work that we need as well.
Right. That's great. Yeah. So there's the aspect of personal journeys and fatherhood and connecting with men. And then there's the part of organizations, systematic change, influencing policy. Tell me a bit more about that side around what do you think organizations need to do to better support fathers, for example?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, we need better statutory paternity leave.
Okay.
In the UK, it's works out to be about £178 per week. Around 22% of dads across the country don't take any paternity leave because they just can't afford it.
22, wow, that's
20%.
high.
1 in 5 dads don't take any paternity leave.
Wow.
I think sometimes we think about work and we think about offices and professional services, but there's so many of the country that are in low income paid jobs, that are in jobs where they have to be on site to do their work.
Yeah.
And I think the average salary in the UK is less than £38,000 or something like that. So for so many families, taking that financial hit and only receiving £178 per week, especially if you're the main breadwinner in the house and you have a new baby, they just can't afford that. So they don't take any paternity leave. So I think we need to learn from a lot of the Nordic countries and increase that. There is a campaign that we are a part of, led by Pregnant and Screwed, to influence our political parties to increase that. The Lib Dems have promised 6 weeks at 90% of salary. We are asking Labour to do the same. Conservatives, I have no faith in them. But it's not a political podcast, so I won't get into that.
No.
But I think we want to definitely go government legislation. In terms of companies, I did some research and published it on my website the other day. There are 74 employers in the UK that have introduced an equal parental leave policy. So they have equalised the maternity and paternity leave. It's the same, parental leave.
Wow.
And there are many more that haven't got an equal parental leave policy, but have enhanced paternity leave. So as a dad, you might get 6 weeks off fully paid, or 2 months off, or 3 months off fully paid. And the reason that is so important is because we know, the research tells us that the amount of time that a dad spends with their child in the early months and years has a direct impact, first of all, on some of the outcomes for that child in regards to resilience and well-being and behavior and education at school,
Yeah.
but also a direct impact on how involved that dad's going to be 5-10 years later. So investing in that dad having the space to learn how to parent. And learning how to parent means picking up on the cues of your newborn baby, understanding what those cries mean, understanding how to bathe your baby on your own. You know, fathers aren't born, they are made. Mothers aren't born, they are made. Like, we have to learn how to parent. Anyone can do that, but learning means time with your baby.
Yeah.
So allowing and enabling dads to have that time is better outcomes for the baby. The dad's going to be more involved, but also has a direct link to workplace gender equality as well. With the gender pay gap, 75% of the gender pay gap is attributed to the motherhood penalty. It's the way in which having a baby impacts a mother's career in the way it doesn't currently impact a father's career. We know the gender pay gap is 3 times higher for women over 40 than it is for women under 40. And there's so much evidence from the Nordic countries that shows that when you equalize paternity leave, when you give dads the opportunity to take time off at the beginning, that has a direct impact on the mother's earnings over her lifetime.
Wow.
So equal parenting is so impactful to the upbringing of the child, but also our ability to have opportunities in our careers as well.
Yeah.
So I think organizations need to look at their paternity leave policies. They need to look at flexible working. And importantly, they need to look at culture. You know, how are we encouraging dads to do what I call parenting out loud?
Yeah.
And that is a key focus for us next year as well.
So what is parenting out loud exactly?
I thought that question was coming. So parenting out loud is a I kind of stumbled across this term, which I think seems to be picking up with people, and it's resonating.
I love it.
I love it. It's working. It's really good. It encapsulates the idea that we can parent loudly, which means to be open and honest and transparent about your caring responsibilities in the workplace. So practically, what does that look like? It looks like proudly requesting flexible working for childcare reasons. It looks like proudly requesting and applying for whatever paternity leave your organization offers proudly, and talking about that at work and letting people know you're having a baby and you're going to be off for this amount of time. It looks like being honest with your employer when you need to take time off work because your child is sick. It looks like telling people and you're out of office when you are out of office on a Friday afternoon to do swimming lessons, putting that on your out of office and telling people that that's what you're doing with your time. And it's a massive cultural shift. It's a massive change from the way we've done things.
Especially for dads.
Yeah. You know, it's so easy. I worked with a guy for years, about 4 years. And I sat next to him. Wouldn't say we were that close, but, you know, we'd see each other every day. I found out about 3 years into working there that he had kids. I was like, how did you hide 2 human beings? Like, I didn't know this, right? This is years ago. We didn't speak about it. He didn't speak about it. He didn't bring it to work. He didn't speak about them in work. And I was like, wow, how do you not talk about your kids at work? But that's not necessarily so rare. Like, you know, for dads to not parent loudly, to not want to be the victim of being seen as someone with caring responsibilities. And mothers have had this for years, right? Some of that perception or that fear is real. We know there can be maternity discrimination.
Yeah.
And some of that fear is perception. It's how are they going to judge me? How am I going to be seen if I need to leave at 3 o'clock to do the school run? How am I going to be seen if I need to work from home on this Thursday when we have this team meeting because my child has tonsillitis? Is this going to be detrimental to my career? Hence why for years dads haven't parented out loud.
Right.
But I think parenting out loud is both a symptom and a cause of culture change. Once organizations do the work to support dads to be active and equal parents, they will start parenting out loud. But also, dads parenting out loud will be a shift and a trigger for organizations to do more to support them and put in place policies because they know what their dads need.
Got it.
So our campaign around that is to say, dads, be brave, be the outlier sometimes if you're the only one. Use your out of office, tell people that your child is sick, put in that flexible working request, you know, parent out loud. You will love it, and you'll be doing so much, especially senior men, you'll be doing so much to change the organization and the culture and normalize male caring. But also, HR, D&I, leaders, you need to be realizing why this is so important and how you can encourage and embrace dads to parent out loud. One quick story. So I was doing a session with an organization last week, and I'd done 2 sessions. One was a parenting out loud session in the summer, and this one was about allyship. And at the end of the session about allyship, this dad approached me and he said, Elliott, I loved the session that you did in the summer. I've been parenting out loud. I now use my out of office to talk about what I do with my kids on a Friday.
Oh.
So he'll be right, I'm seeing Willy Wonka at the cinema, I'm going swimming or whatever. And he was doing that. He was loving it. And he got 3 messages that really stood out to him. The first message was another dad saying, I didn't know that you took Friday afternoons off. Like, I'm going to do the same thing too. This is great. And he went off and requested a flexible working arrangement. Great. The second guy was a guy that just loved his updates so much, he started emailing him randomly on a Friday afternoon just to see what he was doing. So the email, hello, test, and just get just a bit of entertainment.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to get it.
Just to see. But the third person was this guy's manager saying it's unprofessional.
Oh.
Can you stop doing it? And I thought, that as a case study is incredible.
Yeah.
Because what you have there is the full spectrum of the potential result of dads parenting out loud. You have the influence on other people that they want to do the same thing. You have people who are, just love it and support it. And then you have the people who are resistant.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important that we work with leaders to make sure they understand how to support dads to parent loudly and why it's so important to their business as well.
Yeah. Also, that word unprofessional, like the way it rings right now is so archaic almost. It's like, what does that even mean to be professional anymore? As you said, with work and life and that sort of blurring, the boundaries blurring, it almost like, what does that mean to be unprofessional anymore, especially in the context of family life? Like,
who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
So it's not, it's not a word that we support, right? So, Elliott, we've talked a lot about fatherhood and about, fathers when they become fathers and they've been through something, right? They've been through maybe a trauma, or they've, now have to start thinking about parenting out loud, etc. But talk to me about new dads, new fathers, or how a father can prepare to be a dad. What about that work? Because a mother, she gets big and she feels the baby. The dad is almost, not really seeing it from a sort of secondary angle. So tell me a bit more about maybe any tips or thoughts on preparing for fatherhood and eventually becoming that new father.
I think it's very important to have this conversation. A lot of the time we will talk about fatherhood from the point when their baby is born.
Yeah.
But we know that actually it's really important for dads to start thinking about what kind of parent they want to be before their baby is born. It's so easy once your baby is here to sleepwalk into doing things. Literally, you're so tired, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
You're literally sleepwalking. But in the way you're setting up your family life, in the way you set up your work, just the way you do things, it's very easy just to kind of go into whatever you're falling into and not do it intentionally. And I think having some guidance and support before you become a parent with your partner and having a conversation, an open conversation about, how are we splitting the chores in the house? What are we doing about work? How do we make time for both of us to have skin to skin throughout the day, to have our alone time with our baby throughout the day? Like, doing that before your baby is born is really key. But I think we haven't necessarily encouraged that. We have NCT, which is very practical.
Yeah.
It's very much around like how to change a nappy and like health stuff, which is important. But the deeper conversation in regards to like, what does my relationship look like after this? How do I make time to bond with the baby on my own? Like, that kind of needs to be done ideally beforehand. So we were lucky, me and my wife, the church we were going to at the time, the minister had baby prep conversation. So we went to his house. He had 3 kids. He was so funny, actually. He had those air defenders, those big like construction type air defenders. And he had them on the kitchen table. He had 3 kids who were young and they just run around shouting. So he'd be sitting there with his air defenders on doing work. Great. So that was one tip. I haven't got air defenders myself, but you never know in the future. But yeah, we went to his house, and him and his wife, they sat us down for a day and we had lunch there and we just spoke, and they got us to think about the vision for our family. And really think about some of those hard questions around the reality of what's your family going to look like, and how do you want to be in your relationship? How do you keep a happy, healthy marriage, And that was amazing for us. We did the same thing for marriage prep as well. Absolutely amazing. It's got us to think about questions that we would never have known were coming up. So I'm a big advocate for that. You know, you can get it through your faith groups, or maybe you can sit down with an elder couple in your family, someone with wisdom that you trust, and do that. I think is very important. There's a organization in Manchester called Dad Matters, and they are probably the only integrated service through the NHS that is there to support dads through the whole of the maternity journey.
Amazing.
And they have specialists, men who will work with that expectant dad through the pre-birth scans, through the labour, NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit if it's needed, and post-birth as well, up until the child is about 6 months old. And what they find is that they have lots more dads coming back to them afterwards for mental health support. And it's not that Manchester has more mental health issues than the rest of the country. It's that those dads feel like there is support for them through the process.
Yeah.
So it feels like a safe place to go back to after. We know 1 in 10 dads will experience postnatal depression. 1 in 5 mums will experience postnatal depression. So the ability to be able to have support throughout is really key. And that support starts before the baby is born.
Right.
So I think the question you've asked there is completely relevant and important. And I would encourage anyone who is thinking about becoming a father or whose partner is pregnant to start thinking about what kind of dad they want to be now, ultimately.
Okay. And I imagine the more you think about it before and the more you prime yourself, like with this organization, you know, you said something earlier that was very telling, that they don't know they need the help, or they don't know they need this. So they are primed once they've gone through that to look at the red flags, hear the things that don't make sense or where they need help, and they suddenly go, hang on a minute, I need help and I know where to get it. There's like that 2 steps. I think that works really well because it almost fine tunes that, right?
Exactly.
Before they need the help.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is great. So the baby's here, panic stations, 5 top tips.
5 tips. So I prepared for this question.
Great.
I think the first one I'd say is find community. It's anything that I think new dads are going through, someone else has been through it. But it's very, very easy to feel like you're the first one and the only one.
Mm-hmm.
But finding community, hearing stories from other dads, sharing your story, that sometimes is the thing that we need the most. You know, we are animals. We are pack animals. We need to be around other people. We are sociable animals. So I think it's really important to find your community. And there are communities out there. Sometimes you need to be brave and just lean into that community. But I would say that's number one. Second, I would say is ask for what you need at work. So you may need a bit more flexibility. And that can look like anything. It can look like hybrid working. Maybe you want to go compressed hours for a little while, maybe even part-time hours. You know, I changed my working pattern 3 times in the first year of my daughter's birth.
Yeah.
And that was literally a lifesaver, literally. So I think ask for what you need. Don't be shy in asking for what you need. Third, I would say, you know, people ask me for advice on the baby, and I don't know the baby, right? And all babies are different and they have other needs. They're all individual people. So I think the key message is that you will learn your baby. You will learn what they need from you. The biggest thing I've found and I've seen reflected in relationships around me is the amount of stress it can put on a relationship, a new baby. And it's very important, I think, for that couple to compromise and sacrifice for each other and understand that, okay, so for example, in heterosexual couples, if the woman is at home immediately post-birth, she's going to be finding it very difficult. She may have had a C-section. The likelihood of depression is very high. She'll maybe loads of emotions, you know, feeling uncomfortable about being out of work, money, etc. So that stress, you'll also be feeling stress as a man as well, and as a dad, you're probably working, you're probably very tired, you probably come home, you have to do kind of the parenting at home, but also you've got your job. But you both can sometimes feel like you're doing more work. Yeah. And you can both feel like you've got the sharp end when actually you're just both knackered. Yeah. And you're both stressed. And so just sacrificing and compromising for each other, I think, is key. The fourth thing, I think, is accepting help. You know, I think it's very easy to feel like we've got to do everything ourselves, to feel like, you know, it's my family, I'm going to sort everything out. But accept help from grandparents, you know, accept help from sisters, brothers who want to help. Like, it takes a village, is the saying. I think we've lost a little bit of that village.
Yeah.
I think we're very individual. We're very siloed. We're very like keep ourselves to ourselves. And there is times to do that, of course. But I think letting trusted people in is like really, really important. And the fifth thing I would say is that the early days will pass. Like your baby will start sleeping.
That's a good one.
And that kind of early fog of the first, few months, a year or so, that will pass.
Yeah.
And you will get 8 hours sleep eventually.
to say to yourself, it's temporary.
It's temporary.
And
Exactly.
then just that's great. Thanks so much for those tips. Actually, I'm sure everybody will love hearing about those. Yeah. Thanks so much, Elliott, for being here with us today. We really enjoyed it and learned so much, and we wish you the best of luck.